At the end of 2018, amid the holiday preparations, Cheryl Bart grew seriously concerned. She hadn't heard from her 29-year-old daughter, Kelsey, since Thanksgiving. That was unusual for her. Kelsey always kept her updated on her life, despite being busy with work and raising her daughter, Kay. Feeling uneasy, Cheryl contacted the police and requested a welfare check on her daughter. Officers arrived at Kelsey's home in Woodland Park, Colorado, and found her car parked outside. Inside the house, there were signs that Kelsey had left in a hurry. Dirty dishes in the kitchen, uneaten food, and personal belongings like clothes and bags left untouched. However, her phone and wallet were missing. There were no signs of foul play, but a missing person report was filed, and information about Kelsey started to spread. The last time Cheryl spoke with her daughter was on the morning of November 22nd, Thanksgiving Day. Kelsey was in a good mood, baking cinnamon rolls and planning to go grocery shopping for the holiday dinner. That same day, Kelsey went to a Safeway supermarket with Kay. She texted her fiancé, Patrick Frazee, saying she had bought sweet potatoes and was planning to make a casserole if he wanted to join them for dinner. After that, no one saw her again. Patrick, whom Kelsey was engaged to, lived on his mother Sheila's ranch. When police questioned him about Kelsey's disappearance, he claimed that Kelsey had actually broken up with him the day before Thanksgiving. According to him, they could no longer get along but had agreed to co-parent their daughter, Kay. Patrick stated that after their breakup, they met in an alley where Kelsey handed Kay over to him. He also returned some of Kay's belongings to Kelsey. Then, he took their daughter to his ranch for Thanksgiving, but Kelsey never showed up. Patrick insisted that they continued to communicate afterward, though not frequently. He showed investigators text messages, including one where he asked, "Are you awake?" And Kelsey allegedly replied, "Sorry, I didn't hear my phone. I'm going to take a shower and will call you later." He also sent her a message saying, "If this is really what you want, I respect your decision and will give you space." Investigators started doubting his version of events because nothing in Kelsey's behavior suggested she was planning to end their relationship. Just a week earlier, she had been discussing wedding dresses with her mother and shopping for holiday dinner supplies. Kelsey met Patrick in 2016 through a dating site. He lived on a 35-acre ranch, where he trained dogs and cared for horses and donkeys. Kelsey had always loved spending time outdoors, and their shared interests brought them closer. In October 2017, their daughter, Kay, was born. However, despite their engagement and the birth of their child, they continued to live separately, Kelsey in Woodland Park and Patrick on his mother's ranch. Kelsey refused to move in until they could live together as a family without his mother. Their relationship deteriorated over time. Kelsey confided in friends that she was struggling to balance being a mother and maintaining a relationship. Patrick refused to visit her, and Kelsey felt his interest in their relationship was fading. She also suspected that Patrick might still be in contact with his ex-girlfriend, but she had no proof. These thoughts weighed heavily on her. As news of Kelsey's disappearance spread, her friends and family organized a vigil in Washington to raise awareness. Investigators continued gathering information, and doubts grew. Why would Kelsey suddenly decide to break off her engagement when she had been discussing wedding plans with her mother just days before? Patrick claimed that Kelsey was emotionally unstable and possibly suffering from depression. He even hinted at the possibility of suicide as an explanation for her disappearance. However, Kelsey's friends refuted this, saying that while she was busy juggling work and motherhood, she'd never shown signs of depression or suicidal thoughts. She was a flight instructor and loved her job. It allowed her to travel and spend time outdoors, something that always brought her joy. Kelsey was a down-to-earth country girl who loved tractors and farming. Her core values were deeply tied to nature and freedom. However, her dreams of a happy family were slowly fading. She increasingly noticed that Patrick showed little initiative in their relationship. Despite her attempts to keep the family together, their future plans had reached a dead end. She didn't want to live with his mother, and Patrick wasn't willing to change his conditions. This became a major factor in their eventual breakup. Law enforcement searched Kelsey's home and both of her vehicles but found no clear signs of a struggle or forced entry. At this stage, her case was classified as a missing person investigation, and police reached out to the public for information. No one close to Kelsey believed she would have willingly left her daughter for such a long time. The theory that she might have gone to rehab due to substance abuse was also dismissed. None of her friends or family had ever known her to struggle with addiction or depression. Suspicions arose when investigators learned that just days before her disappearance, Kelsey had told her boss that Patrick would be attending her company's holiday party. Her message was filled with exclamation points and emojis, emphasizing her excitement. However, after she vanished, Patrick was absent from all related events. He didn't attend press conferences or candlelight vigils. He never called to check on the investigation. Cheryl and Kelsey's brother, Clint, decided to conduct their own investigation. They returned to Kelsey's house to see if they could find anything that might explain her disappearance. The moment they walked inside, they noticed an overwhelming heat. The thermostat had been turned up to the highest setting. On the table, cinnamon rolls from Thanksgiving morning were still sitting out, and the dirty dishes had not been cleaned. But what disturbed them the most was the refrigerator. It looked as though it had been recently wiped down, with visible streak marks on the surface. They also noticed that the bathroom rug was missing, and Clint spotted what looked like bloodstains on the toilet. Cheryl immediately called investigators, and this time they returned with luminol and a cadaver dog. After processing the scene, traces of blood were found. DNA analysis later confirmed that it was Kelsey's blood. The lead investigator noted that Kelsey's behavior before her disappearance did not align with the theory that she had voluntarily walked away. She was a devoted mother who took great care of her daughter and had never disappeared before. The FBI joined the investigation, and news reports spread about her disappearance. A $225,000 reward was offered for any information that could help solve the case. But suspicions increasingly centered on Patrick, especially after surveillance footage from neighbors showed that on the day Kelsey disappeared, Patrick was seen at her house twice. The first time, he arrived with Kelsey and their daughter, Kay. However, a few hours later, the cameras captured him again, this time alone. The quality of the footage made it unclear whether he was arriving or leaving, but his presence did not align with the version of events he initially told investigators. The situation was becoming more tangled. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Patrick was quickly becoming the prime suspect. From the very beginning, he claimed that he had met Kelsey in an alley where she handed him their child. But now, the video evidence proved he had lied. Detectives grew increasingly doubtful of his innocence, especially as it became clear that Patrick was avoiding any public interactions and showed no interest in his fiancée's fate. The investigation moved forward, and every new discovery only reinforced the idea that Kelsey could not have disappeared voluntarily. On the fourth day after she was reported missing, investigators announced they were close to a breakthrough. New evidence suggested that Kelsey might have been murdered. Patrick remained at the center of attention as the only person who could be connected to her disappearance, though there was still no direct proof. Every detail in this case hinted that Kelsey's disappearance had been carefully planned. Despite claiming that their relationship was over, Patrick had stayed close to Kelsey in her final days. Her colleagues and supervisors never noticed any signs of trouble in her personal life or any indication that she planned to disappear. It seemed as though Kelsey's life had been cut short suddenly, with no apparent reason. Cheryl and Clint refused to give up, determined to uncover the truth and find answers. They were convinced that Kelsey would never abandon her daughter and simply vanish. Her home itself was a silent witness that something had gone terribly wrong. The heat was turned up to the maximum. The refrigerator had been freshly scrubbed, and a bathroom rug had mysteriously disappeared. All of this pointed to an attempt to erase evidence. The traces of blood found in the house only confirmed their worst fears. With each passing day, it became increasingly clear that Kelsey's case was not just a simple missing person investigation. It was something far darker and more terrifying. Patrick, the man who once claimed to love her, had become the primary suspect, and police were focusing more and more on his actions. His strange behavior and false statements led investigators to believe that he was hiding something that might be connected to Kelsey's disappearance. By this point, Kelsey's case had become a true test for both law enforcement and her family. Despite their best efforts, investigators still could not answer the most pressing question: what really happened to Kelsey on the day she vanished? When Woodland Park police returned to Patrick's property for another routine inspection, they noticed recent digging activity on the grounds. Using drones, they captured images of these changes. But Kelsey's body was never found. Investigators continued to communicate with Patrick without making any immediate moves to arrest him, leaving both the press and the public in suspense. Meanwhile, a forensic team turned their attention to Kelsey's home. They conducted searches and removed several brown evidence bags, though the contents were not disclosed. It was clear that investigators were still in the process of analyzing and verifying the evidence. Soon, one of Crystal's friends came forward with crucial information. She revealed that Crystal had shared details that could change the course of the investigation. According to her, Patrick once told Crystal that he needed to take care of the mother of his child. Both women interpreted this as a suggestion to get rid of Kelsey. Phone records became a key element in the case. Data from Kelsey's phone showed that her device had remained in close proximity to Patrick's phone for several days after she disappeared. The last signals from Kelsey's phone were recorded in Idaho. From there, messages were sent to Patrick, her boss, and her mother, Cheryl. It soon became clear that Kelsey hadn't sent those messages. Crystal had. The texts used the same cell towers near Crystal's residence, confirming that she was the one behind them. Police conducted extensive searches on large properties linked to Patrick as part of a warrant obtained on December 14th. A separate warrant was also issued to examine his phone. These efforts led to a crucial discovery, an important contact. The phone number that caught investigators' attention belonged to a woman named Crystal Lee Kenny, a nurse living in Idaho. At first, Crystal denied knowing Patrick, claiming she had only visited him to purchase horses. However, it was later revealed that she and Patrick had been in an on-and-off relationship for over 10 years. Crystal's ex-husband confirmed this, adding that after their divorce, her connection with Patrick had only grown stronger. Meanwhile, investigators began analyzing Patrick's possible motives for Kelsey's disappearance. According to Crystal, Patrick often described Kelsey as an unfit mother and an addict, insisting that he wanted to save his daughter and gain full custody. At the same time, he was in a dire financial situation. He had fallen behind on a $72,000 loan payment and had not paid child support to Kelsey since July. Moreover, Patrick was listed as the beneficiary of a recently issued life insurance policy in Kelsey's name, which further raised suspicions about his involvement in her disappearance. Investigators confronted Crystal again, presenting her with the mounting evidence, and this time, she decided to tell the truth. Crystal admitted that she and Patrick had been in an on-and-off romantic relationship for years, and that Patrick had asked her to kill Kelsey. Initially, he suggested poisoning Kelsey by lacing her coffee with a lethal substance and delivering it to her while pretending to be a stranger. When that plan failed, Patrick tried to persuade Crystal to beat Kelsey to death. Under mounting pressure from the evidence, Crystal agreed to cooperate with investigators, but on one condition. She would plead guilty to a lesser charge, specifically tampering with evidence, which carried a maximum sentence of 3 years in prison. Investigators accepted her deal, and Crystal led them to Kelsey's home, where they uncovered critical evidence, including blood traces on the floor, walls, and household appliances. These findings confirmed that violence had taken place in Kelsey's apartment. Meanwhile, police continued their search for Kelsey's body, but it remained missing. The question of Patrick and Crystal's relationship and its possible connection to Kelsey's disappearance remained unanswered. Investigators were piecing together the puzzle, trying to determine whether Patrick's personal motives and financial troubles had truly led to this tragedy. The police department assured the public that the investigation was progressing, but refused to disclose specific details. The excavation near Patrick's home and the collection of evidence at Kelsey's residence suggested that the case was nearing its conclusion, but definitive answers were still elusive. Despite this, Patrick had not yet been arrested. Law enforcement continued to communicate with him, gathering additional evidence in hopes of building a strong case. Meanwhile, Crystal was prepared to testify against Patrick, a step that could be pivotal in solving the case. New facts continued to emerge, and investigators worked around the clock to uncover the truth about what really happened to Kelsey and what roles Patrick and Crystal played in it. On December 21st, Patrick Frazee was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and 6 other crimes. He pleaded not guilty. During the investigation, Kelsey attracted the attention of both the police and FBI agents actively working on the case in Colorado and other states. Investigators systematically searched Kelsey's home for additional evidence and kept a close watch on Patrick. On Friday morning, after his arrest, Patrick appeared in court via video call while the police continued to search for new clues. The case caused a public outcry, yet no one from Kelsey's family was present in the courtroom. Back in November 2018, events unfolded rapidly. On November 22nd, Kelsey was in constant contact with Patrick. Calls and messages were exchanged between their phones starting at 1 a.m. At 9:37 a.m., Kelsey sent Patrick a message, followed by a brief phone call. She told him about preparing Thanksgiving dinner and was getting ready to go to the supermarket. Later, Patrick claimed that after a brief meeting where Kelsey handed over their daughter, Kay, they went their separate ways. However, that was not their last encounter. Both Patrick's and Kelsey's cell phones remained connected to the same tower from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. At 1:24 p.m., Patrick was seen entering Kelsey's house with her. According to Crystal, Patrick blindfolded Kelsey under the pretense of having her guess the scent of a candle. Then, he grabbed a baseball bat and began striking her. He beat her to death. At that moment, their young daughter was in another room. Kelsey's last words, as Patrick later claimed, were, "Please, stop." After the murder, Patrick took his daughter to Walmart to refuel his truck and then returned to Kelsey's house. He was seen near the house around 3:30 p.m. and called both his mother Sheila and Crystal. He told Crystal she needed to come to Colorado to clean up the mess. Crystal understood that Kelsey had been killed and that she was expected to clean the crime scene. She gathered bleach, gloves, and other supplies before embarking on a 13-hour drive from Idaho to Colorado. After ending the call, Patrick placed Kelsey's body in a plastic container and took it to Nash Ranch to temporarily hide it. Both his and Kelsey's cell phones remained connected to the same towers as he transported the body. Following this, Patrick returned home to celebrate Thanksgiving dinner with his daughter and family. When Crystal arrived at Kelsey's house, she spent hours cleaning. She later claimed that she intentionally left traces of blood behind, so Patrick would eventually get caught and the truth would come to light. She also placed detergent in the washing machine with some towels, though she was instructed to wash everything. Afterward, she and Patrick drove to Nash Ranch to retrieve Kelsey's body. Back at Patrick's house, they grabbed a tote bag. Patrick made 19 calls and sent multiple messages from both phones, pretending to be Kelsey. They then placed the tote bag into a large trough, poured 5 gallons of gasoline over it, and watched it burn. Crystal added Kelsey's Bible and some of Kay's toys to the fire. Patrick's mother, Sheila, watched from a distance. She later became a key witness in the case. Crystal also took Kelsey's gun and phone to continue the deception, sending texts to create the illusion that Kelsey was still alive. Patrick asked her to keep the gun to make it seem like Kelsey might have been suicidal. Crystal later destroyed Kelsey's phone, while Patrick, in a panic, drove to Arizona to find out if data from a damaged phone could be recovered. Later, Patrick and Crystal discussed the container. Crystal described it as aluminum, round, and bottomless. She parked near it and stepped out to talk to Patrick. At that moment, Patrick handed her Kelsey's phone and gave her instructions on what to do with it. When Patrick lit the fire, Crystal was nearby, helping gather wood and placing it in the fire pit. Patrick used gasoline and motor oil to fuel the flames. His mother, Sheila, stepped onto the porch, watching everything unfold. Crystal recalled seeing Sheila emerge from behind two trees and head toward the house. The events surrounding Kelsey's murder became known thanks to Crystal's testimony and cell phone data, which allowed the police to reconstruct the timeline of events in early March and strengthen the case against Patrick. All these details and actions made the case increasingly compelling, eventually leading to Patrick Frazie's arrest. Patrick Frazie's trial began in October 2019, almost a year after his fiancée Kelsey disappeared. Cameras and live reporting were prohibited in the courtroom, and security measures were heightened. The jury heard testimonies from key witnesses, including Crystal Lee Kenny, who had previously pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence, and an inmate who had shared a cell with Patrick. Patrick had passed notes written on toilet paper to the inmate, asking for help in getting rid of people who knew about the crime. These notes mentioned Crystal, her friend, and Kelsey's mother, Cheryl. Patrick wanted them all to disappear and remain unseen until a specific date, even expressing a desire for Crystal to be killed. Just a few hours into deliberations, the jury unanimously found Patrick Frazie guilty of murdering his fiancée Kelsey and of all charges against him. Patrick was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, along with 3 consecutive 48-year sentences for 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder and 12 years for tampering with a body. In total, he received life plus 156 years in prison. The judge noted that Patrick's actions were cruel and senseless. After beating his fiancée to death, he burned her body like garbage. The judge emphasized that such a crime deserved the harshest penalty allowed by law. Crystal Lee was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 1 year of supervised release, the maximum sentence requested by Kelsey's family. District Attorney Dan May stated that the deal with Crystal felt like a pact with the devil, but was necessary to put Patrick behind bars. However, he believed that Crystal's sentence was too lenient. Crystal Lee Kenny, a nurse, had pleaded guilty earlier that year to evidence tampering for helping Patrick Frazie. She cooperated with the investigation and testified against Frazie, becoming a key prosecution witness. According to some sources, Crystal and Patrick had a romantic relationship, while her family claimed she had only been involved because Patrick threatened her. On the day of her sentencing, Crystal was released but faced prison time. A lead investigator with 37 years of experience was relieved that Crystal had provided some answers, but her confession did not change the fact that Kelsey's body was never found. Crystal claimed that Patrick had burned the body, and the investigator had to deliver this devastating news to Kelsey's parents. Patrick's parents, Sheila and her husband, also faced a shocking reality. Sheila was detained but not arrested, and an emergency court hearing was held regarding the custody of Kelsey's daughter, Kay. Patrick's parents sought custody, but the court ruled that Kay should remain with her maternal grandmother, Cheryl. If Crystal's testimony was truthful, and Sheila had indeed witnessed her son burning Kelsey's body, then the court's decision to leave the child with Cheryl was justified. Many of Kelsey's friends were not surprised by Patrick's actions. His ex-girlfriend, Vanessa, stated that Patrick was always manipulative and highly intelligent. Their relationship, which began with mutual attraction, quickly became emotionally abusive and controlling. They ultimately broke up in 2014 when Vanessa realized that his behavior perfectly matched the traits of a psychopath. She believed that Crystal had fallen under Patrick's influence just as she once had. Vanessa also claimed that Patrick was a complex person who knew how to exploit people's weaknesses. Despite Crystal's testimony, many unanswered questions still remained. The investigator mentally prepared himself for the conversation with Kelsey's parents and hoped he would be able to find her body. However, upon learning that the body had been burned, the investigator struggled to grasp the reality that he would have to deliver this heartbreaking news to Kelsey's parents, Cheryl, and her husband. After Crystal Lee's sentencing, Prosecutor Dan May expressed dissatisfaction with her lenient punishment. He stated that Crystal Lee wasn't even serving the full sentence. He planned to approach the Legislative Assembly to fight against efforts to increase the number of good deeds that could shorten a sentence. May also compared the deal with Crystal to a pact with the devil, but acknowledged it was necessary to put Patrick behind bars. Kelsey's remains were never found. On that Thanksgiving Day in the small town of Woodland Park, an event occurred that left a dark mark on the town's history. The residents tried their best to remove that stain. Volunteers, builders, and local businesses came together to restore Kelsey's home so it could be sold. One neighbor said it was their way of showing that Woodland Park was not about Patrick Frazee but about good people. Kelsey's family acknowledged that obtaining a conviction without Crystal's cooperation would have been extremely difficult. However, like many others, they believed she deserved a harsher punishment. The only thing she didn't do was deliver the final blow, they said. The thought of Kelsey's daughter growing up without her mother was unbearable for everyone. Patrick's actions seemed senseless and cruel. His motives remained a mystery. Kelsey's uncle noted that Kelsey was known for giving the best hugs, and everyone would miss that dearly. Crystal was sentenced to 18 months in prison and was released on parole in 2021. Her 3-year sentence effectively didn't mean the full prison term, as she immediately had half of it credited to her for good behavior upon entering the correctional facility. Investigator May emphasized that the sentence delivered in court should have been the actual time served. He pointed out that the deal with the devil was inevitable and not something to be proud of, but without it, justice for Kelsey would not have been achieved. The lead investigator added that Crystal had committed terrible acts, and although they weren't as brutal as Patrick's actions, they were serious nonetheless. It was difficult for the investigator to understand why she made such decisions, especially since he had never encountered domestic violence before. He acknowledged that he respected the dynamics of such situations, but Crystal was a smart woman and a good mother. The decision she made remained incomprehensible, and likely no one would ever understand it. Still, without her help, they wouldn't have achieved what they did. Another detective, despite everything he had learned, was still torn between sympathy and disgust for her actions. He noted that, without experience with domestic violence, it was hard to understand how someone could do such a thing and not go to the police. To him, it remained a mystery. One of the detectives also added that there were no photographs of victims in his office, but he remembered every victim, especially in cases like this. Kelsey would be one of those he would remember for a long time. He couldn't understand why Patrick did what he did. How could a person, whether it was Patrick or someone else, be so cruel to the mother of their child? The district attorney and another officer noted that, unfortunately, they had never met Kelsey in person but would have liked to under different circumstances. They knew that working in the aviation industry or the military wasn't easy for a woman, but Kelsey managed it. She was a respected and valuable employee, and the feedback from colleagues and students reflected what a wonderful person she was. She was devoted not only to her daughter but also to her country. Everyone involved in the investigation, including FBI agents, prosecutors, and other agencies, truly cared about her. Patrick Frazee, convicted of murder, attempted to appeal his conviction, but in 2023, his petition was denied. The lead investigator acknowledged that Crystal had made serious mistakes, but the justice they achieved would have been impossible without her help. The events that occurred on that Thanksgiving Day left their mark, and the small town tried to move forward, gradually restoring not only Kelsey's home but also its reputation.